Hi, it's Kirby Sommers. Today is Saturday, August 16th, 2025. And no, this is not a live. I'm on StreamYard, and despite the fact that I pay them $88 every month for the privilege of uploading my logo, they won't remove their own logo unless I increase it to just shy of $200 a month, which I can't afford. So it's not a live. I'm pre recording this at just before 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. And the reason I'm doing this is to give you a heads up that I'm not going to really be using X often, if at all. I was pretty turned off and have been for a long time because not only am I constantly barraged by strangers that I don't know and haven't even seen their handle. But it's a little, for someone like myself, it's a little creepy and very aggressive. And I don't know if it's friend or foe. And I just don't feel comfortable there. However, it means that if I have an update, which I have one for you today about a lot of things, I'm going to add it here and or my Substack. And by the way, I've got just shy of 7,000 subscribers, so that doesn't really give me the accurate count. So, and a lot of you, thank you for joining my Substack, and or I will be including information on my Patreon. But and by the way, I have an Instagram at Real Kirby Sommers, and I try to upload stuff there, but I just can't deal with the stuff that happens on X. And as a survivor of what I'm going to continue to call a cabal, there's no other word for it. I'm just, I don't feel that safe on X anymore. And so I posted something saying, you know what, as of today, unless it's for like a really big update, I'm not going to be there, period. End of story. So I'm bringing up this image that came up when I began going public, because again, I was facing threats around 2008, which really is interesting because it coincides with when J.E. began his very basic and an almost non-prison sentence. He was in the local stockade. He had access to, he had he could leave every day, which he did with his Russian uh, bodyguard driver, kung fu teacher by the name of Igor. And, he would go to his office, which he rented, and corporation for which he started just before the prison sentence. And then when he was released and really not really closely monitored at all, well, he just made it disappear. However, during that period in time, and this is before I knew there was Jeffrey Epstein, I had heard Ira discuss certain things. I did not know, however, it was Jeff, meaning Jeff as in Jeffrey. And I didn't, it took me a long time to figure a lot of things out. However, what I would do is I would write articles. And of course, I would write these books, ebooks, that was geared to helping. I've always wanted to help people. I think the fact that I felt so helpless for so long motivated me to want to help other people, which I did through my work for Hurricane Katrina. I did through my work hurricane, like the one that happened in Texas some years ago. And I did trying to help renters avoid broker fees through my books, Landlord Links, which I began, I believe, in 2000-ish. And so this picture would show up if somebody tried to find me. This and other pictures would show up, and it says Kirby Sommers, a detailed job interview associated with landlord hyperlinks creator. So clearly that's not me. But all of the information that I would try to put out, believing that it would save my life, well, that information was suppressed. I had not really recognized the scope of the danger that I posed to these people, not just because of what I said about Michelle Merkles being connected to the Jonathan Pollard case, Rafi Eitan, a lot of the Israeli leaders, Ariel Sharon, but also Ronald Reagan. I knew a lot of what happened with the Reagan administration, and of course George H.W. Bush afterwards and all of that. But also because of this guy, Robert Maxwell. Now, we know that Robert Maxwell is, of course, Glenn's father. However, it was all part of the same thing. It surrounded. I'm just going to say that while Robert Maxwell has primarily the front story of the theft of the promised software has been presented to the world at nauseum, what hasn't really been discussed is the nuclear aspect of this. So also in 2008, when I was being silenced online in a very big way, I received a call from a higher up in the CIA. And I would have gotten the email, and I may do another podcast about that specific incident. He reached out to me. I used to have, with these articles that I wrote, a special email where people could send me emails. That's now gone. However, he reached out to me as if he wanted information on one of the Rickless companies and whether or not a stock that his father owned was still valid. And of course, I would realize that was like, it was a ruse to get into my life. And that is actually, I'm going to be talking about Stanley Pottinger. I'm going to be talking about Bradley Edwards. And I'm going to be talking about David Boies. I'm also going to be talking about some stuff that is not known, although probably a lot of what I'm going to probably say is unknown. And at the time, because I had already had many instances of having, like Rose McGowan would later share with the world, people inserted into my life. Well, I didn't trust him when he first contacted me. And he used a State Department address, which is what a good portion of CIA people use. And so what I said basically was, well, if I'm going to call the White House, and basically it was just the White House basic number. And I said, and I'm going to ask for you. And if I can find you, then I'll talk to you, but I'm not going to talk to you until I do. In any event, I did call the White House. They put me through to him. But what I discovered, and this is no longer online, is that he was a high level official connected to the nuclear division, which you can't find anything about anymore. I mean, at the time, this is 2008, there was a little bit about it, but now it's all gone. And by the way, he met an untimely unalivement. He befriended me. He stayed in touch with me. He did ask me peculiar questions about whether or not the Rickleses were spies and whether or not I knew they were spies. And at the time, to be frank with you, I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know about the Rickless connection to Robert Maxwell until later. I didn't know a lot about the stuff that I share on my Substack regularly. I share a lot of things, from the Beatles connection to this cabal. The Beatles, they're connected to the cabal. I don't know what to say to you. They just are. Or about Jack Nicholson's connection to the cabal and other iterations, let's say, of the so-called one-off JE case, which is not a one-off. It's been ongoing. And it's all on my Substack. What I don't allow, because I'm very particular, you may notice by now that I'm a little prickly. I've been stalked, I have been threatened, I have been kidnapped, literally held hostage in my house. The police have never come to my aid. I have suffered all kinds of uh, assaults against my person, my character, my very being. Members of my family are no longer alive because of, an unexpected accident that I'm not ever going to get into because it's too painful. Leon Black has did something some years ago he has inserted into my life, believe it or not. And Leon, I knew about Leon clearly because of his connection to Ira. And then, of course, it doesn't stop me. I just keep talking about Leslie Wexner, and I've written an entire book, Merchant of Death. It's on my website, which is kirbysommers.com. I have had people ask me, well, what's your website? Well, it's listed always below in the description box. If you cannot find kirbysommers.com, then I don't know what to say, but it's there. So, I want to talk about these guys. And so we see Virginia Giuffre, God rest her soul. We see the older man on the far left would be David Boies, who also represented Harvey Weinstein and Bill and Hillary Clinton, among others. And by the way, Black Cube, which I have written about, I have talked about. Black Cube's attorneys at one point in time were Bill Gates' father and another man who was the first director of a British spy agency. And, we know that David Boies has repeatedly used Black Cube. And I can say repeatedly because during the Elizabeth Holmes situation, he was also involved with Elizabeth Holmes. He was also her attorney. He sat on the board of directors. I spoke with a couple of whistleblowers that David Boies had basically hired Black Cube to harass. It was an older man. He was a scientist, also connected to CIA, older, and he had a son, also again connected to CIA. And these guys wanted to tell me how David was following them, looking through their trash through Black Cube. So it wasn't just that Boies hired Black Cube for just the Rose McGowan case against Ronan Farrow as well, but he has apparently consistently used them. I'm going to say something else about David Boies as it pertains to one of the victims of the JE case. So we see also in this photograph, Bradley Edwards, who, by the way, is not a hero. Please don't hero worship him at all because he handed Virginia and other women to David Boies, and the man right behind, hiding behind Bradley Edwards, is J. Stanley Pottinger. What I want to bring to your attention before I go too far into the whole attorney thing, which is never talked about enough, in my opinion, is that Pottinger, for about 8 to 9 years, dated Gloria Steinem. Well, that's a nice sign that she's making over her head because that's exactly what she represented. While she was outed initially by Ramparts magazine in the 1960s for having worked with the CIA, she continued to work for the CIA under the auspices of Mortimer Zuckerman, who is, again, one of the friends of Meshullam Rickless, Ira Rickless, Mona Rickless, who's no longer alive, and who, again, is very close friends with David Boies. This is a very incestuous, circular club. You can't know one of these people without knowing the other. And in 2013, according to Bradley Edwards' book, he received a call just before midnight in June of 2013. June of 2013. And the caller was like, oh, and it was Friday night. And as soon as he said hello, the voice on the other end went into a wind up. I'm reading from his book that eventually became familiar. He's like, let me introduce myself. The caller said, my name is Stan Pottinger. And then he goes on to tell him that, oh, I was the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice in Washington. So he goes on to then share that he also works with David Boies. However, what no one has surmised, it should not take a rocket scientist to figure this out, is that neither J. Stanley Pottinger, who clearly you can connect to intelligence just by doing a little digging of your own, in addition to his friend David Boies, these men did not wake up one day and decide on their own steam to become embedded into the lives of the Epstein victims. No, that's not how I see it. This is a government sanctioned program. Frankly, yeah, does it connect to other governments? Of course. But as a government sanctioned program, they were sent in. I am 99.9% certain, and frankly, I'll just go on and just say I'm 100% certain that they were sent in as fixers. As fixers. So they didn't just come in to grab all the money, although they did. They grabbed a lot of money. Bradley Edwards is now a very wealthy man, but I don't look at Bradley Edwards as being anything but a sellout. It's my opinion. I'm allowed to have an opinion. Many of you are allowed to have an opinion too. So these men embedded themselves into the lives of these women to, I'm going to tell you what they did. They created a certain narrative for the story that appeared in mainstream. And I know that I became a thorn in their side. And I'll tell you how I know. Well, there are many reasons, and probably some of this I'm going to have to put on Substack. But for now, what I'll say is that there was a website I used to go and, because at the time, before Elon Musk made my account disappear, I had tens of thousands of followers, people from everywhere, primarily from Hollywood. I didn't understand why so many Hollywood actors were following my stuff at the time. I clearly understand it now. A lot of people from MIT. Even Joe Ito was following my stuff. And at the time, I was still researching. I was trying to piece things together. I would speak to people from MIT on a regular basis, trying to get their story because they didn't want to be, quote, smeared. But in any event, they wanted to control the narrative. And there was this website I would go to, and it would tell me, well, who was following my then called Twitter account. And the very first person, believe it or not, was Yoko Ono. Later, I would figure it out. And you can probably, if you have read my Beatles series on my Substack, you probably may be able to figure it out if you read that. The second person was that guy standing there, Bradley Edwards, followed by Virginia. But I knew Virginia at the time, and we would often exchange emails and or information. And I did a lot of things to help Virginia at the time. So she came in third, and I knew she was in Florida. I knew she was in Miami at the time because she was fighting this thing. But also I knew that because I was told, they, meaning the attorneys, are upset at you for the narrative. Now, my narrative has never changed. I talk about everything. If you go to my Substack, I go down rabbit holes for many, many people that all converge into this world. I talk about Epstein during the 1970s. I talk about Epstein during the 1980s. I say a lot of things that are kept out of the mainstream narrative. Uh, I'm gonna share something with you that's going to be shocking, perhaps, but someone is talking about it. I'm not going to name him here, but I shared it with a couple of people that I know that do research so that they would know and not be alarmed. But in order to make Virginia, they decided on Virginia. She was going to be the face of this. And in order to give her credibility, she was already being, let's say, beaten up by her husband. We've seen the photos of her not looking well. I posted when I was on Sean Atwood's show, I posted the transcript showing Alan Dershowitz's deposition where he stated very concisely that Virginia was supposed to appear on a certain television show and she could not. And this is before anyone, this is long before 2019. I forget the date, but it was a couple of years before that. And that she couldn't because she had just been beaten up by her husband and she was recuperating because makeup alone was not going to cover the bruising. So that it didn't matter, aside from the fact that it didn't matter to these guys, she had been beaten up, and they continued to push Virginia into the world. Now, what else did they do? Under Bradley Edwards' auspices, and you can find it yourself, they created Victims Refuse Silence. It is a fake NGO. It did not really exist other than on paper. So they gave her a title of being the founder of Victims Refuse Silence, which later changed its name. It's fake. It did not exist. It was something that, so that the reason they did that, from what I can tell, is A, to give her some credibility as a witness, as a victim that's stepping forward. But B, it's often come to me to wonder if they did that in order to keep her in line, that if she did not do as they said, because I remember Virginia was very quick. Whenever David said, you can't do this, you have to do this, she would do exactly what David said, even though it was not what she wanted. An example of that is she allowed David to settle the lawsuit that she brought against Ghislaine. It was a defamation lawsuit that Virginia brought against Ghislaine, initially with Bradley Edwards, before Bradley turned Virginia and others, handed them on a silver plate to Boys and Pottinger, who I'm going to get to in a second because there's a lot I want to say to you. And Virginia wanted this to go to trial. I mean, she wasn't looking for a payout, although a payout is all you can get in civil court, because this was never going to be litigated by the government on a federal level. Okay, it just wasn't going to be. But hey, Pottinger settled it, and Virginia was not happy. She really wanted Ghislaine to go be put through the ringer. She was supposed to be giving a deposition before the judge because she kept pleading the fifth and she kept lying and she had perjured herself. So the final deposition was going to happen just before the trial began, before a jury. And hey, what did David do? He settled it. So giving her a fake nonprofit, Victims Refuse Silence, which now is called SOAR, it never did anything. So I always thought, okay, maybe they did that to hold it over her head. If you don't do what we're going to say that this is fake. But if you look for it now, it's still under Bradley Edwards' name. He's the one that did it for her, under the I am sure under the direction of Boys and Pottinger. That said, it's come to my attention And I mean, we know that Pottinger, according to Maria Farmer, who has made statements on various platforms, she has alleged that Pottinger and she were an item. She changed, depending on who she had spoken to at the time, she changed it from boyfriend to whatever. She's used various words to describe J. Stanley Pottinger, who made a move on her, who controlled her life, and who also created a fake corporation that many people have found, and they have used it against Maria. I'm not taking anybody's side here other than to say that these attorneys have been not ethical. Not ethical. You can lose your license. I mean, Pottinger is now dead, but his son, Matt, did work with Donald Trump's administration until the January situation, the Capitol stuff that happened, and then Matt was out. However, I mean, the rot goes deep. I'm just saying the rot goes deep. So, all right, so they put both of them into fake corporations. And I'm tired of seeing Virginia's name dragged through the mud. I want to add one more thing about her memoir because I'm seeing that dragged through the mud. Virginia burned her original memoir, hoping that she and her new husband could get a fresh start. They had a bonfire. She burned her past. However, when she had her third child, so Tara Palmieri, if you're listening to this, and you may be, you get the story wrong. It was when Virginia had her third child, which is a girl, is when she decided to, okay, she's going to cooperate with the FBI, believing that there was actual, quote, justice, which does not really exist, as we can all see. And she began to cooperate because she looked at her little baby girl and she didn't want what happened to her as a young girl to happen to her own daughter. So, Tara, you have been on other shows and you misstate the facts. And I'm sure you have help. Perhaps you can have your staff vet information for you so that you do not sound as if you don't know the story. You spent time with Virginia, taking her around the country in a very, what I call very short-sighted effort to get Epstein's employees to talk about him. Like, I don't know what to say to you, Tara, but I would say to you, like, you misled Virginia, in my opinion, and your show is not being properly vetted. Just FYI, because it was Virginia's third child, not the first, not the second, the third. Okay. The other thing is that, and I just need a little water. All right. I get really riled up because the public will only ever have a little smidge of what's happened. I'm trying to compose myself. Well, clearly, when one is selected to be preyed upon, you're already broken. I know that when I was selected to be preyed upon by Ira Rickless, I was truly broken. But not only was I broken, I was healing. I had a boyfriend. I was about to get married. I was working, a regular job. I was doing regular things. I had started a side business. I was in love. I thought I had put all of that behind me. And then, of course, he hired me. I'm sorry. He hired a man by the name of Dave, who happened to have been a captain at the same police station that has the district where Leslie Wexner purchased the mansion that he would later give to J.E. And that man became his business partner. He gave him an obscene amount of money at the time to find me for him. He didn't know my name because I met him while I was being transportationed. And I didn't want anything to do with him. Like I'd already gotten a lot of marriage proposals. I'd already met a lot of very famous people. I was just not interested. I was just not interested. But he continued to harass me. If you have read my book, The Billionaire's Woman memoir, again, it's on my website. I just need more water because I'm getting carried away again. So he hires this man who finds me for him. And you can read what happens, how he continued to pursue me despite the fact that I said no, 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 and how he then chased my boyfriend away. And I was left alone and broken and alone. My point being that when Virginia and a lot of these other women were initially pulled into this this like nasty net, they too were broken. They too were broken. And sometimes you don't heal from that. By the way, I've healed from that, and I plan on doing a podcast for survivors who have not healed to give you some tips on how to heal. You can self-heal. I did it. You can do it too. All right. And so because these women had not healed, they would be perfect to re-victimize and re-traumatize and reuse, as J. Stanley Pottinger did with Maria Farmer. He insinuated himself into her private life, having private moments with him, with her, which is outside. You can't do that if you're somebody's attorney. That is the biggest breach of confidence. And I mean, you just can't do that. It's not allowed. It's not allowed. And apparently Maria wasn't the only one. He went on to try this with Virginia and with other women that had stepped forward to out J.E. Apparently, Pottinger was walking around unzipping his fly at every opportune moment. These were all broken women trying to hold on to whatever threads of like reality that they could, trying to rebuild their lives wherever they were. But there comes J. Stanley Pottinger unzipping himself at every possible moment. He's a piece of garbage. He's a piece of garbage, and nobody but me is going to tell you. And I really don't care. I don't care. Because somebody has to tell you what these men did to these women. And then to have other so-called journalists who have, professions given to them by college and or masters. I don't have any of that. What all I have is the truth and my dedication to bringing you the underbelly of this monster, which I do primarily on my Substack. And here to a limited extent, because clearly, I can't even say J.E.'s full name without fear of my channel being gone. So that's what happened. Now, we know that Maria had a temper. I think 90% of you know that. And she didn't just take it out against followers or against me or against other people. She took it out against David Boies, who, by the way, deserved all whatever he had to go through. So at least somebody yelled at him. But what I did not know was that he had the ability to increase what, let's say, somebody like Maria received from the J.E. compensation fund. Now, remember, I shared with you that David Boies had, which is unusual, he had the ability to help draft the formatting of the J.E. Victims Compensation Fund, which now is being handled by a woman named Jordana, but initially it was handled by the guy who handled everything. there's a movie on Netflix, a fake movie about him. He handled the Catholic Church scandal. He handled the oil spill. He handled the 9/11 fund, where they pushed my friend who lost her husband into taking I believe it was a $1 million settlement. She lost her husband, the only breadwinner for the family, in 9/11, and they forced her to take a $1 million settlement. That was back in 2002. And a lot of the widows and widowers didn't want to settle, but Eric Feinberg was very aggressive in how he handled the settlements, in much the same way that Pottinger and Edwards were with the victims of JE. That said, the Catholic Church settlements, from what I have been able to determine, and if you have found different, please let me know in the comment section. I've seen them to be average about $20,000, not a million or anything. However, some of the JE victims received 7.5 million. And I told you the other day that neither Maria nor her sister Annie were R-worded. They were touched inappropriately, at least Maria was. Annie got a massage, and she woke up to find Epstein in her bed, and then she ran to the bathroom and locked herself in there. Well, Annie had to disclose because she appeared at Ghislaine's trial as a witness. And by the way, the judge didn't instruct the jury not to count Annie's testimony against Ghislaine because, I mean, Nathan had a whole bunch of different things, so you may want to go back. I mean, you can certainly, if you do your due diligence, you can find what happened. But they were instructed not to take Annie's very compelling testimony, by the way, into account insofar as what eventually happened with Ghislaine. However, neither of the two were R-worded, and because Annie had to disclose it, we, the public, know that it was 1.5 million. And then for Maria, it's my understanding, received 1 million, and she was not happy with 1 million. So she fought with David Boies, and she received 1.5 million. And I only share this with you because I realized that they had control over how much these women got. And if Maria had not fought with David Boies, she would have received $1 million, which, and other people got 7.5 million, others got 5 million. And I'm sorry, but when I look at victims of the Catholic Church, which has been going on for as long as the church has existed, and they get 20,000, it goes right back to my point of these men were sent in there to control these victims. And whether you want to call them victims or not, I've seen some people not want to call them victims, but whether you want to call them victims or not, that's what they're known as. So, and that's how the press talks about them. So we're going to continue to call them victims. They were in the circle, and they were vulnerable. And so, again, back to my point, neither Pottinger nor David Boies woke up one morning and said, oh, we're going to go and get a slice of that. No, I believe, again, that they were sent by the U.S. government to go and control this. And if it took giving people extra money to just shut up and say nothing, especially with you've got Pottinger. Really, you're going to just go around just unzipping yourself and pushing yourself onto women who are traumatized? It's kind of disgusting. I feel very, it's slimy. There are moments I wish I had never gotten involved because I did not know the depths of the depravity of every person that's been involved in the ongoing, oh God, I can't even. In any event, I just want to give those people who are new to my channel, I just want to give you, I want to thank you for subscribing and for liking. Those of you who follow me all the time, thank you for your support here. I do want to say that for people who are just passing through, I'm sorry. I've put up with so much that if there are unkind comments, I just tend to block people. I don't have the patience required for people who are unkind. That said, to everyone else who is here because you have a good heart and you want to know what's going on and you support my work, whether by subscribing to my YouTube channel or my Substack or my Patreon or just by leaving a message so that it helps the algorithm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, you have a good weekend. Bye.